Most people holding XRP think they understand what they own. They know the headlines, they follow the charts, and they've seen the hype. But the truth is, 90% of XRP holders have no idea what's actually happening behind the scenes, and the few who do are already preparing for what's coming next. This isn't about a secret price prediction or a wild theory. It's about facts hidden in plain sight, data, partnerships, and developments that most investors overlook because they're distracted by short-term noise. Today, we're breaking it all down, the real mechanisms that will determine XRP's value, the signals that the market keeps missing, and why the smartest investors are looking at XRP not as a coin, but as a financial infrastructure asset. Welcome back to Crypto Equation, where we go deeper than speculation and uncover what's actually driving this next phase of the financial revolution. Let's start with something simple. If you ask most XRP holders what gives the asset its value, they'll say, it's fast, or it's used for payments. And that's true, but it's only half the picture. What almost no one realizes is that XRP's real power isn't in speed, it's in liquidity. Liquidity is what makes markets move. It's what allows institutions to shift billions without moving the price. And Ripple built XRP specifically to solve liquidity fragmentation, the invisible friction that costs banks and businesses trillions every year. Think about it. When a bank sends money across borders, it pre-funds accounts in multiple currencies just to guarantee settlement. That ties up capital that could be earning returns elsewhere. Now multiply that by thousands of banks and corporations. That's over $27 trillion locked up in the old system. XRP is designed to free that capital. By bridging currencies instantly, it removes the need for pre-funded accounts. That's what on-demand liquidity does. It's not just about moving money faster, it's about unlocking a massive global inefficiency. Most holders don't realize that the moment large institutions start freeing that trapped capital, XRP demand will shift from speculative to functional. And functional demand doesn't depend on hype. It depends on usage. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. When liquidity moves through Ripple's system, it doesn't just use XRP as a medium of exchange. Each transaction adds to a growing data network of payment routes, exchange corridors, and liquidity providers. That data increases efficiency, and efficiency attracts more volume. It's a self-reinforcing loop. So while most investors are watching the price chart, Ripple is building something much bigger, a self-sustaining liquidity ecosystem. Once that ecosystem reaches critical mass, the value of XRP becomes less about speculation and more about necessity. This is the shift 90% of holders don't see coming because they're focused on price, not function. Let's talk about another blind spot, regulatory positioning. For years, uncertainty kept XRP on the sidelines. But after the 2023 ruling that declared XRP not a security when traded on exchanges, the floodgates quietly opened. Exchanges relisted, liquidity returned, and Ripple began expanding again, this time with far less noise and far more precision. While the rest of the crypto market debated politics and tokens, Ripple focused on infrastructure, working with regulators, banks, and enterprises that actually move money. That's why you don't see explosive headlines every week. This is quiet adoption. And that's exactly how real financial systems grow, slowly, under the radar, until one day they're everywhere. So when the average retail investor finally wakes up and sees headlines like, major bank uses RippleNet for real-time settlement, they'll assume it happened overnight. But it didn't. It's happening now. They just don't see it. Now let's get even deeper. What most XRP holders don't understand is that Ripple and XRP are part of a much bigger architecture that's emerging around the world, the tokenization of real-world assets. We're talking about everything, stocks, bonds, real estate, commodities, all being represented digitally on blockchain. The Boston Consulting Group estimates that tokenized assets will reach $16 trillion by 2030, and Ripple has already positioned the XRP ledger to handle these assets natively. That means the same network moving money across borders can also move tokenized value of any kind, instantly, securely, and globally. If that sounds like the foundation of the next financial system, that's because it is. And yet, most investors are still arguing about price predictions. The truth is, price is just the surface reflection of adoption. By the time the numbers make sense to everyone, the opportunity will have passed. Right now, XRP sits in that rare window where the fundamentals are strong, the infrastructure is ready, but mainstream awareness hasn't caught up. That's what makes this moment so unusual. It's not about guessing, it's about understanding the math. Every new partnership adds to the network. Every new regulation removes a barrier. Every new corridor increases volume. And together, they create the kind of compounding effect that most retail investors only recognize in hindsight. Here's a hard truth. Most people holding XRP aren't investors, they're spectators. They refresh their app, they follow influencers, they trade emotions. But the ones who truly understand what's happening treat XRP like equity in the future of global liquidity. They hold it because they see the writing on the wall, that the world's financial plumbing is being rebuilt right now. If you grasp that, you don't need hype, you just need patience. What separates the 10% who understand from the 90% who don't is education. The few who study XRP's design know that it isn't just a token. It's part of an entire liquidity network. They understand that RippleNet, the XRP ledger, and on-demand liquidity are three pieces of a single system that moves value the way the internet moves information. They read quarterly reports instead of rumors. They follow central bank pilot programs instead of price prediction threads. They understand that real adoption looks boring before it looks explosive. And that's why they're calm. They know the difference between a speculative rally and a structural transformation. Let's get specific. Every major corridor Ripple activates adds measurable volume. Transaction data shows settlement times of 3 seconds or less, with costs below a single cent. That's not theory. Those transactions already happen daily between regions like Mexico, Japan, the Philippines, and Europe. Each corridor Ripple opens creates real demand for XRP as bridge liquidity. Every dollar of daily volume needs a matching pool of XRP somewhere in the system. Multiply that by the hundreds of corridors that will come online over the next few years, and you start to see why utility value matters more than speculation. Price will eventually adjust to the liquidity requirement, not the other way around. That's what 90% of holders miss. They think price drives adoption, but adoption is what will ultimately drive price. There's another detail few understand: network effects. In digital systems, value doesn't grow linearly. It compounds. When 10 banks connect to RippleNet, they save money. When 100 connect, they create liquidity loops between themselves that make the network more efficient. When 1,000 connect, the system becomes a standard. At that point, XRP stops being an alternative and becomes infrastructure. That's the stage Ripple is quietly approaching. Every new institution that integrates makes the network more valuable for the next one. It's the same pattern we saw with email, smartphones, and the internet itself. And by the time the majority recognizes it, it's already too late to be early. Here's another number the market ignores: 27 trillion US dollars. That's the estimated amount of capital trapped in vostro accounts, funds parked around the world to facilitate slow cross-border payments. Ripple's solution eliminates the need for those accounts. If even a small fraction of that money begins moving through XRP-based corridors, the liquidity requirement will dwarf current circulation. That's not a theory cooked up on social media. It's in IMF white papers and central bank pilot data. The system is evolving toward instantaneous settlement, and XRP fits that model mathematically. So, when you hear people call XRP just another coin, remember, they haven't read the numbers. They haven't seen the data showing that Ripple's enterprise clients grew by over 30% in a single year. They haven't noticed that central banks exploring CBDCs list interoperability as their #1 challenge, the exact problem Ripple already solved. They're missing the story because they're looking at the chart, not the change. What should you do with that knowledge? You don't have to buy into hype or chase unrealistic targets. You just have to understand what you own. If you hold XRP, you hold a stake in a network designed to move value globally at lightning speed, a system already being tested and used by the institutions that control modern finance. That's the part 90% of holders don't realize. They're holding the future without recognizing what it actually represents. And because of that, they treat it like a gamble instead of a position. The 10% who see the full picture, they're preparing, not for an overnight miracle, but for a steady, inevitable transition that will look sudden only to those who weren't paying attention. Think about it like this: when the rest of the market finally wakes up, they won't be asking whether XRP works, they'll be asking how they missed it. They'll see the partnerships, the liquidity corridors, the regulatory clarity, all the signs that were there from the beginning, and they'll call it luck. But it won't be luck. It'll be math, patience, and foresight. That's why this moment matters. Because right now, you still have time to learn, to position, and to understand what most people don't. Dash. If this helped you see the bigger picture, subscribe to Crypto Equation Dash, the channel that simplifies crypto, finance, and investing so you can make informed decisions before the crowd. Comment below, what do you think 90% of XRP holders are still missing? And when do you think the rest of the world will finally connect the dots? Remember, the numbers don't lie. They just take time for everyone else to read. This is Crypto Equation, and I'll see you in the next one.